Oregon, Illinois is a small historic town known for its quiet surroundings, the local dam, and nearby Loudon State Park where the Black Hawk statue overlooks the river valley. On the surface, it is the kind of place people travel to for a weekend trip and a bit of nature, and nothing would suggest that anything darker lies beneath it. But for the people who call this town home, Oregon also carries a darker story, one that's rarely spoken about beyond the local community. Because in 1948, long before it became known for its parks and river views, it became tied to something far more unsettling. An unsolved double murder that still remains one of the town's most baffling and enduring mysteries nearly 8 decades later. And what makes it even more unsettling is that this story doesn't end with the original investigation. Decades later, when one of the victims was exhumed for modern testing, investigators made a shocking discovery that added an entirely new layer of confusion to everything that was thought to be understood about what happened here. That discovery would change how some people view the case entirely, and it remains one of the most disturbing unanswered questions connected to it. But to understand how this mystery even began, we have to start with the life and final night of a 17-year-old named Mary Jane Reed. Mary Jane Reed lived on Hastings Avenue in a working-class neighborhood nicknamed Sandtown because in 1948, many of the families here, including Mary's father, worked at the nearby silica plant. Mary had taken on a big responsibility at a young age, leaving school at just 15 years old to help care for her mother, and by the time she was 17, she was working nights as a switchboard operator for the local telephone company. It was a job that often involved working long hours connecting calls across town while most people were asleep. Those who knew Mary described her as mature for her age, someone who carried herself with a sense of independence that made her seem older than she really was. She was also known to date older men, something that in the 1940s did not draw much attention in a small-town setting. It was through her job at the telephone company that she met Stanley Skridla. Stanley Skridla was 28 years old, a Navy veteran, and a lineman for the same telephone company Mary worked for. They met by chance when Mary accidentally connected to a phone line he was working on. What started as a simple mistake turned into a conversation, and not long after that, the two decided to go out together. On the night of June 24, 1948, that plan turned into their first date. Mary finished her night shift at around 10 p.m. and Stanley picked her up from work shortly afterward. The two drove into town and spent part of the evening visiting local bars, where several witnesses later confirmed seeing them together. According to newspaper accounts from the time, they appeared to be enjoying the night, talking with others, and moving between locations like any other couple out for the evening. At around 11:30 p.m., the two were seen leaving a local bar together, and it would be the last time anyone could say for certain that they saw them alive. After leaving the bar, the couple drove out to County Farm Road, a quiet spot just outside Oregon that in 1948 was often used as a lover's lane. Stanley parked his car on the south side of the gravel road, roughly 300 yards from the highway, in a location that would have been quiet and out of view from passing vehicles. How exactly the next event unfolded is not fully known, but much of what investigators piece together comes from physical evidence and early newspaper reporting from 1948. At some point, while the couple were parked on the lover's lane, another vehicle pulled ahead of Stanley's car and stopped with its lights on. Whether Stanley got out of the vehicle on his own or was forced out has never been confirmed, but what is known is that he ended up standing near the driver's door of his car. He was then shot 5 times with a .32 caliber automatic pistol, likely passing away instantly when 2 of the bullets went through his heart and abdomen. After the deadly shooting, his body was dragged into a ditch near the roadway, his car was taken from the scene, and after that moment, Mary Jane Reed disappeared. The following morning, at around 6:30 a.m., a local driving to work on County Farm Road saw a man's shoe lying in the roadway, along with what appeared to be a large pool of blood and drag marks. When he stopped to investigate further, he discovered the body of Stanley Skridla lying face down in a ditch along the side of the road. Law enforcement was quickly called to the scene, and investigators began documenting what they found. At the crime scene, they found 5 empty shell casings, a blood stain in the roadway, and a cigarette butt that appeared to have lipstick on it, but Mary Jane Reed was nowhere to be found. About 1 hour after the body was found in the ditch, Stanley's car was found abandoned near an intersection about a mile north of the crime scene. The car keys were missing, and so was Mary. At that point, the investigation quickly shifted in urgency as it became clear that Mary was missing and was either being held captive or she suffered the same fate as Stanley Skridla. As days passed without any word from her, concern grew into fear as search efforts began across the county, involving law enforcement, friends, and members of the community. Despite those efforts, there were no confirmed sightings of her and no clear indication of where she might have been taken, but 4 days later, the search for Mary came to a devastating end. A truck driver parked along a remote road noticed a strong odor coming from the brush along the roadside, and when he stepped out to investigate, he discovered the body of a young woman partially concealed in the grass, and that woman was later identified as Mary Jane Reed. Her clothing had been neatly folded and placed on top of her body, and she had suffered a single gunshot wound to the back of the head near the base of the skull. The remote location where she was found was only a short distance from the silica plant where her father worked, and only a few miles from the Lover's Lane where Stanley was shot. In one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the case, it was later reported that her father had driven down that same stretch of road multiple times during the search without realizing that his daughter was lying just out of view in the brush. The impact on the Reed family was immediate and devastating, especially considering that Mary had been expected to serve as the maid of honor in her brother's wedding the very next day. Instead of preparing for a happy celebration, the family was forced to face an unimaginable loss without answers. As investigators continued their work, they determined through ballistics that the same gun had been used in both murders. However, despite that connection, the timeline of events remained unclear, and there were multiple theories about what may have happened before and after Stanley was shot. Some believed Mary was killed shortly after witnessing the shooting, while others suggested she may have been taken from the scene and held captive before being brought to the location where her body was found. Witness statements added further complexity to the case. According to newspaper reports from 1948, several individuals saw Mary and Stanley at a bar earlier that evening, and some of those witnesses reported seeing them speaking with another couple in the parking lot before they left. One witness stated that it appeared there may have been some kind of an argument taking place between them. Another witness at the bar reported seeing two men sitting in a parked vehicle that he described as run down, and he noted that those men left the parking lot shortly before Mary and her date left. Others said they saw the young couple driving out of the parking lot of the bar with another vehicle following behind them. Additional witnesses later reported seeing a similar rundown vehicle near County Farm Road around the time of the murders, including one account of a car pulling into the Lover's Lane and turning its lights off, as well as another report of a man sitting alone in a parked vehicle as if he was waiting for someone. Despite these accounts, none of the individuals described were ever identified, and none of the sightings led to a confirmed suspect or a vehicle in the area that matched the description given by the witness. Over the course of the investigation, authorities interviewed numerous individuals, including former boyfriends of Mary Jane Reed and others who may have had connections to either victim. One man who had previously threatened Mary was questioned and later cleared, and another individual even confessed to the murders before investigators determined that his confession was not credible. In total, more than 150 people were questioned, and many were given lie detector tests, but all were eventually cleared. No weapon matching the one used in the murders was ever recovered, and no suspect was ever charged. To add even more complexity to the case, a bartender who saw the couple together was asked by authorities to view Stanley's body, and the witness said it wasn't the man seen in the bar with Mary that night. As the years passed, the case remained unsolved, and for decades there were no major developments that brought investigators any closer to identifying who was responsible. But that began to change in 1999 when a man named Mike Ahrens became mayor of Oregon, Illinois. Ahrens, who also owns the Roadhouse restaurant in town, had heard about the murders many times from residents and became increasingly interested in the case, especially after hearing long-standing rumors that suggested the truth behind what happened may never have fully come to light. Some in the community believed that a member of local law enforcement at the time may have committed the murders and that the case may have been quietly covered up. According to these long-standing rumors, Mary Jane Reed was believed by some to have been having an affair with a married sheriff's deputy at the time of the murders. While none of these claims were ever proven in court and no official charges were ever made against anyone in law enforcement, the rumor persisted quietly within the community for decades. Those who believed the theory suggested that the relationship may have ended shortly before the murders took place. Some versions of the rumor claim that tensions began to rise between them in the days leading up to the murders and that the officer was seen slapping Mary in public. While no charges were ever brought against anyone connected to those rumors, the claims were enough to push Aarons to take a closer look at the case himself. Working alongside Mary Jane's surviving brother Warren Reed, Aarons began pushing for the case to be re-examined using modern forensic methods. Their efforts eventually led to a court order allowing Mary's body to be exhumed from Daysville Cemetery in 2005, nearly 60 years after her tragic death. When the exhumation took place, investigators hoped that advances in forensic science might reveal evidence that had been missed in 1948. According to press reports from 2005, much of Mary's remains were still intact, and forensic experts conducted a detailed examination that included X-rays, tissue sampling, and efforts to recover DNA from underneath her fingernails. Despite those efforts, the testing did not produce any usable DNA or new evidence that could identify a suspect. However, during the examination, a forensic anthropologist made a shocking discovery that would change how the public viewed the case. The specialist reported that the uppermost vertebrae in the neck did not appear to match the rest of the remains. In simpler terms, the bone directly connected to the skull appeared to belong to one individual, while the bones below it appeared to belong to another person of a similar age. In other words, the skull and part of the spine did not appear to come from the same body and likely belonged to someone else. To take that finding a step further, a professional forensic sketch was created based on the skull that was recovered, showing what the individual may have looked like in life. What made it even more unsettling was that the reconstructed face did not resemble Mary Jane Reed at all, which only added to the growing concern that the skull may not have belonged to her in the first place. Although these findings shocked the community, they were not universally accepted, and some have argued that it may have been a mistake or an interpretation that remains open to debate. But others, including Mike Aarons and Mary's brother Warren, believe it raises serious questions about what actually happened after her death and whether her remains may have been lost or stolen at some point. In the years that followed, the case continued to draw attention, and Aarons remained involved in efforts to find answers. In 2015, he helped push for another court-approved exhumation, this time involving the body of Stanley Skridla, which the family supported. During that examination, forensic investigators recovered 2 bullets from Stanley's remains, which were then compared to a handgun that had been turned over to authorities. However, testing determined that the bullets did not match that weapon, and once again, no new DNA evidence was found that could identify a suspect. Still determined to find some form of closure, Mike Aarons later offered a $20,000 reward for the return of Mary Jane Reed's skull, hoping that if it was missing, someone might come forward with information. But no one ever did, and the reward went unclaimed. Even after decades of investigation, rumors, and attempts to revisit the case with modern forensic methods, the murders of Mary Jane Reed and Stanley Skridla remain officially unsolved, and what truly happened that night in 1948 has never been fully proven beyond doubt. Over the years, investigators have floated several theories, and one of them points to 2 brothers, now deceased, who were believed to have been involved in a robbery that went wrong. According to that theory, Stanley and Mary may have encountered the 2 brothers during the course of the night, and the situation escalated into violence that ended in both of their deaths. But that conclusion has never been universally accepted, and others have continued to question whether the available evidence truly supports that version of events. Even outside of this theory, there are still major gaps in the story that never fully add up, like the mysterious couple seen talking to Mary and Stanley in the parking lot of the bar, or the vehicle that was seen following them when they left. Some people believe Stanley may have even picked up a hitchhiker after leaving the bar that night, something he was reportedly known to do, and that this unknown individual could have been responsible for the attack. Others point back to long-standing rumors involving Mary allegedly having an affair with a married sheriff's deputy, suggesting that personal conflict or jealousy may have played a role in what happened, even though no charges were ever brought against anyone in law enforcement. And then there's the skull that doesn't belong to Mary, indicating her remains were either lost after the exhumation or the skull was removed on purpose as part of a cover-up. After everything that has been examined and debated for nearly 80 years, the truth about who killed this young couple on County Farm Road in June of 1948 still remains a total mystery. Was this a robbery that spiraled out of control, as authorities later theorized? Was it a chance encounter with a hitchhiker that turned deadly? Or was there something more personal and hidden behind the scenes that was never fully uncovered? We may never know for certain, especially as most of the people connected to this story are no longer alive. But leave a comment below and let me know what you think about this unsolved murder case. Who do you think took the lives of Mary Jane Reed and Stanley Skridla? And if you want to explore more murder stories like this one, click on the playlist you see on the screen. And if you want early access to my videos and other perks, you can also become a channel member. Click the link in the description or the join button now for details. Thanks for watching.